Venerable sisters and brothers, Dhamma friends, it's the time for our today's Dhamma talk. Today is the 7th day. To start the Dhamma talk, may everyone consent with 3 times sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Namo tasse bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhasse namo tasse bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhasse Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhasse Sanya bhikkhave anatta sanya bhikkhave atta abhavissa naidang sanya abadaya sangvatteyati. Dear Dhamma friends, along this particular discourse, namely the Ananta Lakkana Sutta or Panchavaggiya Sutta, the Buddha introducing as well as giving a discourse gradually from one aggregates to the others. So far we have taken time for the aggregate of the form, the body and the feelings, and today's quotation is basically to the next one, that is Sanya in Pali, often translated as perception or sometimes as cognition, and according to the recognition happens. So therefore this is also very important aspect in one's own personality. This can be, the Sanya can be recognized as one of the mental factors, just like feelings. So when you're taking a cognitive series, according to the Buddhist teaching, it says whenever the eye, ear, nose or tongue or the body, for each one, whenever the eye and the visual objects come into contact with, avenue with, then if the eye consciousness going to happen, these three are enough to make the contact. So then only the cognitive series starts to feel it. That means that at that time, that particular person becoming a seer, that his mind is fully engaged in this seeing for that thought moment, and whatever it may be come into contact is going to be perceived or to be cognized. So that is the way in each and every moment the mind is engaging in one of the faculties with corresponding sensuous impingements. So endlessly, incessant manner, the series are happening in the mind. So therefore, if someone wish to see the mechanism, first of all one has to know the theory behind it, and then with the help of the theory, if someone can apply one's own direct understanding, that may lead to proper understanding, proper knowledge on the aspect. So therefore, this presentation of the Buddha, in this particular sutta, it says that very perception, this cognition, is appear. It's also one of the things can represent to the unmindful mind, to the undeveloped mind, as me, as mine, as myself. Or in the sense, whenever eye is contacted with these visual objects, if the mind is completely engaged there, that is called for the moment the eye consciousness. When these things are happening, the seeing happens. The particular person is becoming a seer. So when that happens, it is natural for that person to recognize or take into grant that what I see is as mine or me or myself is seeing, or seeing is in this capacity of myself, and the seeing and the self is the equal. Likewise, whatever you see, you are going to recognize or perceive or assume connected with your soul. That is how we develop our personality. So it is changing from seeing, hearing, smelling, touching without any agenda. Keep on happening. In order to give an example, the Buddha has presented whenever the carpenter is about to make a furniture, first of all he put signs on the wood that he has selected, and something like that. Whenever something come into our memory, contact with, our mind has the capacity to put a label into that for later references. So in normal English language we call cognition is helpful for us to recognize it, the same thing. So cognition is the sign we put, the label we put. Accordingly, whenever we contact it the second, third times, we recognize it as a familiar one or strange one. So when it is happening, that very cognition, that is the first impression, is play a very big role to the recognition. So Buddha's challenge is that very first impression will it be worthwhile to take as a yardstick or as a medium for the recognition, because being it is first impression, that is not comprehensive kind of a yardstick. So therefore, unless otherwise you observe it again and again, you reify it, then he says yes, but not with the first impression. So therefore in the meditation, it is in order to understand this falsified perception or wrong recognition, the Buddha asks us to establish the connection with the particular primary object by observing it again and again and again and again. And that is on the way we develop the mental factor of mindfulness. And mindfulness is the only one can help you to see when and where you are to observe the same object of meditation again and again. Your perception is evolving. Your perception is not the throughout, it is changing. So that is the point the Buddha made. The very first impression, if you are observing again and again, subject to change, transient nature. So therefore, without arriving at a quick decision that you have seen, this is what I see is existing, that is the untrained mind. So instead of the judgmental kind of observation, you apply the mind again and again on the same object with the open mind as to making room for you to see more and more, you to observe the same thing. Along the time, it's changing. It is evolving. It is going through a metamorphosis. And whenever you are to observe that, you will see the label you have put for the first impression and recognition you have done in the first impression is questionable as far as you are observing it continuously. So that is how the Buddha says, unless otherwise you are testing with your own perception again and again, your tendency is to believe the first impression. And then our whole knowledge, if it is going to based upon this just first impression, how much it is vulnerable for this transient nature, and how much it is leading to wrong conclusions, and whatever the conclusions you are going to arrive upon this wrong information, never going to give a lasting decision. So instead of rushing to a decision, it is advisable or it is wise to increase observation. That is why some Westerners, in defining mindfulness, they invited for the yogis to have a evenly suspended attention to the object and suspended decision and keep on observing. And then only you develop the kind of a mental factor known as mindfulness. And if you be mindful on a series of events, ultimately you can see, as you are keep on observing, that very impression, that very perception, that very recognition subject to change. So this happens in a number of stages, but in order to have this kind of understanding, first of all you have your mindset based upon the notion of permanence, which is the characteristic of the untrained mind, and instead of the notion of permanence, you must prepare your mindset to accept the impermanence, and then only you will have the opening mindset healthy enough for the insight meditation. So even if you take the example of sitting meditation and so to say in-breath and out-breath, or rising and falling, or if you are to look into the left and the right in the walking meditation, or whatever the thing you do in your day-to-day chorus, just observe it without arriving at a decision, how much your perception is changing as and when you increase the observation. And that is how in the very first part, that is the corporeal reality, the body, or the representing aspect of the body, namely the in-breath and out-breath, if you are to observe in a non-judgmental way, more and more you observe that very object undergoing some kind of a changes. If you are entertaining the perception of permanence, you will challenge your own observation. How that the long in-breath going to become short. How that short in-breath ultimately going to be unperceivable. And then if you are challenging it, if you are not ready to accept it, what you would do is you will start forced breathing. Or you will start opening your eyes. Or you will think something wrong and you start to entertain doubts. Can that be happen? Of course, this is not happening in an undisturbed way. Often that process will be disturbed by the external sounds, pains and thoughts. So therefore, it will take long time for someone to keep the object of meditation in view with and continue very patiently to see chronologically along the time how much that particular object is changing. Two things can happen. One thing, if you are patiently observing the particular object, namely the in-breath and out-breath, as and when your body becomes silent, and as and when your mind becomes calmed, so your necessity of oxygen, necessity of air also reduces. So that also can lead physically to the short breath. The other one is your perception is changing. So the Buddha apply more value to the second. He says, whatever it may be, if you are to observe continuously, he says, your your perception is going to dwindle off, going to taper it off. When and where it is going to, you are going to see a new thing, a new facet, new object, new intrusion, then again the perception becomes very bright and you become excited, and you either have a quick attachment or detachment, and that is how the untrained mind is jumping from one to the other. As an example, the Buddha says the monkey mind, jumping from one to the other without resting on anything, and that is how the present day the city life is. Changing from one to the other, no chance, and therefore mind develops so much of tension, so much of frustration. Instead, if you are to see continuously of one object, naturally you can see more and more you to observe the same object. Your very perception also undergoing some changes. So ultimately, as far as the perception become dwindling off, our mind read, the object itself is disappearing like. I will make it little clear. When you are, for an example, take the in-breath and out-breath. If you are lucky, can manage to see the breath from the gross to the subtlety, subtle to the subtlest. At that time, the rational mind with doubt whether my breathing stopped. And therefore it become excited. Am I responsible about taking breath and enliven my life? Otherwise may I die. Or may I go paralytic kind of a stroke? What is going to happen? So under such circumstances, the commentator says, if your mind is going to doubt about that, how can I live without air? How can I live without transaction of in-breath and out-breath? You have to counter-argue, argue it with, the breath can happen, breath can stop only under few circumstances in the samsara. That is, as far as you are in the womb, as a fetus, no breathing. Or if you are underwater, no breathing. If you are in the fourth jhana, no breathing. If you are in Sanya Vedayita Nirodhe, that is the kind of a deep absorption without feeling and perception, or if you are dead. So you have to ask when the mind is grumbling, mind is doubting, entertaining doubts, am I in these circumstances? So definitely you can verify that is not. This is basically your perception to the breath change whenever these signs, whenever these labels, whenever these other characteristics reduced, it appear like no breath. That is how the perception is going to cheat you. So therefore, if you go prepared, under such circumstances, you will reach, you are bound to reach another kind of a perception which never you will experience under the sensuous experience. So therefore, starting with the gross breath, definitely you are in the sensuous kind of experience. You can feel the touch of the air column either on your left nostril or right nostril or top of your upper lip. So you can verify it. That perception is happening through the sensitivity of the body. And the mind is with the body. So when it is dwindling it off, ultimately it becomes a completely mind-made business. You can't relate it to the body, and therefore sensitivity of the body is shifting into the mind faculty, and the air, the touching agent of the air, all ceases to exist. So therefore you are not dead yet, you are not sleepy, you are not unconscious, but kind of a perception you can entertain, which is not related to the either body or anything, and that you must be bold enough, you must be ready to accept it, season it, and master it, to see what kind of a sanya, what kind of a perception you are going to have. So all that you can do predictably, you can do in a uninterrupted manner if you develop this kind of a mindset. If you develop this kind of a view, all the known perceptions are bound with senses. So you have to take one particular primary object and then focus the attention on that and try to see the evolution, try to see the transient nature of that very particular perception, how much you can continue with it, and while you are continuing, how much changes, how much new facets are going to happen. So this is the kind of a challenge in the meditation. Therefore, only in Vipassana, when compared to the other all endeavors in the world, your very object also undergoing some changes. All the other other challenges and endeavors, the object is fixed. It is a matter of reaching the object. But in Vipassana, it is so challenging, it is so intrinsic by its own nature. As far as you are going, your object also changing, and therefore your shifting of the paradigm has to happen in number of times. Each time, if you are going to develop the permanent notion, then you will be very arrogant, you will be reacting to it, and you will be tensed, and you will be developing kind of a frustration. So therefore, knowledge on the perception is very important, that its volatile nature, its changing nature, its transient nature, and when compared to the materiality, when compared to the feeling, this volatile nature is much prominent in this perception. And if you understand the cognitive series, at the beginning, whenever you, for example, in-breath you recognize as cool, out-breath as warm. For the first time you come to know in-breath and out-breath has some perceivable changes, and you take it as a sign to continue with continuity of the mindfulness. And when it's going further and further, you may come to know many other aspects of the in-breath and out-breath. More and more aspects come, your mindfulness become established, your perception also become very strongly supporting the mindfulness. So therefore, early part of your meditation, you are really establishing the perception, fixing the perception in order to fix your mindfulness. And whenever the object is being recognized through the personal characteristics, your perception is become hard and fast. Mindfulness also become hard and fast. But unavoidably, through that personal objects characteristic or private characteristic, moment you try to see common characteristics, all the signs, all the perception radically challenged. And then you can't see the difference between the in-breath and out-breath, but still the breath is there. Under such circumstances, today also there was a question, and there are some questionnaire asked question. The Maha system is always asking you to note, always asking you to label it. Of course, yes, at the beginning, but at a very critical point, your labeling drop off. Your labeling, you can't apply it. It is not magnetic so far, then onward. So you have to understand this changing of the perception. You must be accommodating. Otherwise, you will be reacting by repetitive, unwanted noting or forced breathing. So for when and where the personal characteristic, private characteristic, individual characteristics make room for the common characteristics, your meditation is diversifying, your mindfulness is diversifying, at that moment, those who have self-notion or self-notion in the nihilistic form or self-notion in the eternality, they are reacting to this kind of a change in a different way. So this is a very challenging position, how much one can maintain the mindfulness when the objects are changing from the individual characteristics to the common characteristics. So when I first come and meet Venerable Jnanarama as a layperson, of course it was a very casual meeting. Anyway, he asked me, I started phrasing his book, 7 Stages of Purification and Insight Knowledges. Then I told it is like a prescription written for me. So when I'm observing, I see some kind of a changes, and it was very profound. So he was asking me, give me an example. I have never before done any interviews with a serious master. So it happened me to express myself. Then I told, I feel like in the very high speed on an aeroplane, and it is at the end of the runway and is about to take off. And when it is taking off, no more you can feel the ground. And slowly it is thrusting upon the aerodynamics, and you feel uncomfortable situation. But at that time you have to tighten belts, you have to be at your seat, and that is what the captain says. And later you see another kind of equilibrium on air, and very cool, very comfortable, and that changing, throughout that changing you have to maintain the mindfulness steady. But the perception is undergoing a radical changes. The bumping upon the hard ground, and ultimately it takes at the highest momentum, taking into the air. Likewise, that when you are observing the in-breath and out-breath, discreetly and discriminative way, this is in-breath, this is out-breath. If you are very sharp, if your mindfulness is well seasoned, and if you go prepared, you will observe that still you can feel the breath, where you can see in-breath and out-breaths discretely different. You feel the breath, but in-breath and out-breath appear equal. When that happens, only thing was that your characteristic features, individual characteristic feature of the in-breath and out-breath lost. But air movements are happening. So as far as the individual characteristic lost, the air element, either inflow, outflow, is happening. You must not lose your confidence. You must keep the mindfulness intact, and then still be aware of what is happening. At that moment, the breath appear unperceivable. The touching point will be unperceivable. The discrimination between in-breath and out-breath will be unperceivable, but it is not a mistake of you. It is not something wrong. It is not something abnormal. That is the point. You have to maintain the balance. You have to maintain the integrity. You have to maintain the confidence. So that the before and after, there are two kinds of perceptions. Earlier you maintain it through the individual characteristics, but later it is going to the common characteristic. What is common is anything, whether it's cool or warm or any movement or stability, whatever the arising nature is bound to disappear. Arising and passing away is common for any matter or any non-matter things. So as far as you see individual characteristic, you can see the intrinsic nature, but ultimately when it is going to become very transient, everything arising and passing away in the very, very high speed, then everything appear in the same common characteristic, and that is the point. The sanya is changing from this sensuous kind of nature to the common, but that can be based as the peg, as the sign for the mindfulness to continue. And that change is the one you have to monitor as much as possible without allowing any doubt to entertain, agitation to take place, tension to develop, and season it as much as possible. When you are seasoning, you can go into the transient nature without allowing any boredom to set in, without allowing any doubt to set in, without allowing sometimes sleepiness to set in. Otherwise, these places are being camouflaged by boredom, monotony, or fearfulness, or insecurity, or kind of sleepiness. So therefore, even with respect to the mindfulness, this changing of the perception is very drastic, very quick, unless otherwise you disturb yourself. So therefore, a beginner may come up to that level, maybe 30 to 35 minutes of meditation, and then only one can see the calming down of the breath, unperceivable level of the breath, and has to be prepared. But next time when you are meditating in the same place, in the same conditions, you can reach this by 20 minutes. And another day's time you may come up to the 10 minutes. Ultimately 1 or 2 minutes time, you can easily go into this unperceivable situation. So if you go prepared, amazingly you will see 1 or 2 breaths time, breathing disappears, and then you can go into this very spacious, subtle freedom, your solitude. But if you are not well instructed, what you would do is, when that subtle situation happens, you doubt whether I see the beginning of the in-breath, middle of the in-breath, end of the in-breath. I did not see the long in-breath. I did not see the short in-breath. Like, you question and keep on doing forced breathing maybe, or doubting, how can I come up to that level without passing the so-called theoretical stages. So that is because of your notion of permanence perception. You expect daily to happen in quickly, but if you are smart enough, you can understand your mindfulness is there. These changes of the perception can happen very quickly because it is just a mental aspect, and you have to accommodate it. If the mind is calm, if the breath is there, if the mindfulness is there, don't doubt. Don't go for and do forced breathing. Just let it happen. Then that is the way you have to facilitate. Then you have to promote your meditation so that your mindset is ready for any transient nature, changing perception, and then only you can leave aside the noting, labeling, and accommodate whatever the openness, whatever the calmness of the mind, and then you are the one to be with it and to entertain it without doubting, without artificially introducing, forcing, noting and labeling. So therefore, understanding where up to what point you must note mentally or with the using a word, and at what point it is dropping off, and their own word, you have to leave the plane autopiloting. Then only the meditation is taking autopilot. Still, if you are going to manipulate it, definitely you can do disturbance of this equilibrium. So therefore, whenever you are developing mindfulness, you must understand how much you do steering, how much you do controlling of the meditation, and once it is getting the momentum, how to let the autopiloting to take place. In that sense, this perception is very crucial, and you must be reflecting upon it in a radical way. Ultimately, you may find you have nothing to wait till the breath becomes subtle. Even the end of the out-breath, before starting the in-breath, this subtlety is there for a split second. If you are sharp enough, if you can cut thin slicing of time, the dwindling stage of the tapering off stage of the out-breath itself is going to give in the very first breath. You can go to the very deep layers, and after complete calm down, only the out-breath starts. And there itself you have this unperceivable stage that verily recognized by Sigmund Freud. He mentioned this as unconscious. He put a heavy load in understanding the consciousness with respect to the unconscious. But the thing is, unconscious is unperceivable, but your knowledge, your mindfulness can easily understand this is perceivable, this is unperceivable. So openness to this unperceivable is much more make your meditation vivid, make your meditation radical. Then only with respect to the unperceivable, you can perceive the oncoming in-breath. Very subtle in-breath is happening, but before that, it's a completely, at least one split second, unperceivable. This is happening in the micro level in meditators as well as non-meditators. Mindful mind as well as unmindful mind. But the unmindful mind never geared, never prepared, so easily they say there is no such a thing. But the mindful person who has gone systematically and ultimately mastered it, he or she can trap that moment between two in-breaths, between two breaths, in-breath, out-breath and the in-breath, there is something unperceivable. And whenever you are developing the skill, developing the so-called prepared mindset, you will understand, specifically in the long in-breath or long out-breath, within the in-breath also there are 1,001 short in-breaths. It is happening in a stage way, gradual way. Within one in-breath there are 1,000 of in-breaths. Within out-breath there are 1,000 of out-breaths. When you are lifting the hand, even though you feel like one single action, but it is just like a cartoon film. If you are to show in animation in the cartoon films, you know how number of slides has to run in a rhythmic way. And as it is flashing on the screen, it appears like animation, but between two flashes, there should have a pitch darkness. Otherwise, no animation can take place. But how much you are looking at the screen, you will never see the darkness. That is our eye is in such a camouflage. Once it is flashed, it can maintain that flash even through the darkness, and within that, it is expecting the next flash. In between, mind-made perception is happening. That is the point where the animation can take place. Otherwise, if you analyze it and see, cartoon is just few strokes. No animation. Exactly the same thing. Even if you call this breath is a one single unit, it's an agglomeration. From one in-breath to out-breath, there is a gap. If you can trace it, you can see within in-breath, there are 1,001 tiny little particles in between each and every one. It is unperceivable or unconscious or subconscious is lying. So when it is happening, you can see each and every action is nothing but an agglomeration of tiny actions. So when everything happens, you feel like animation, you feel like ego, you feel like self. So more you to go into tiny particles, If mind is analytical, more and more go into the tiniest, in the sense, time aspect and the space aspect, there is no animation. They are happening like a cartoon film, and the story is building up under the guise of this perception. So observing, while observing, if you have to see how the story is getting connected to each other, how the train it happens, how the connection happens, how much radical nature or critical approach, or how much noble quest you must develop. So this is impossible for untrained mind, specifically the unmindful mind, unconcentrated mind. So therefore the Buddha at the beginning, he says, you develop the mindfulness and the concentration with the materiality, and use the materiality as the primary object, observe it again and again and again. And once the mindfulness come into being, through that mindfulness and the concentration, this very object of meditation, of the primary object, also subjected to change. You may be ready to see if you go prepared. That preparedness never happens for the beginner's mind. They are just developing the necessary characteristic, mental factors, and when they come into align with, then only the seeing through can happen. And for example, if you can manage to see each and every pleasurable feeling is leaving aside, passing away, leaving unpleasure. Each and every unpleasurable event, when it is goes off, there's a kind of a pleasure. So likewise, these changes, if you are ready to observe it, you may see, if you are observing one thing, one object, one phenomena, again and again and again, how much the perception is changing. That are we, or am I, ready to see this changing of the perception? And if you develop, if you are already in the permanent notion, you will react to it. You will never facilitate it. Instead, you will react it or assume otherwise. So therefore, the Dhamma, the true nature, is always depicting and it is showing, but our resistance to see it, our negative feeling to see it, first and foremost you may understand through this sanya. Therefore, analyzing little further, Venerable Jnanananda, he says, whenever you recognize or cognize some item, you get either shape or the color of the item, and then it represents the item. And that is how the neurological way it keep it decoded into your mind. And that is the first thing is recognition or cognition, that is taking in. Imagine if you wish to give that idea to another one, how you are going to explain the same thing to another person, that we call communication. It's such a big gap, how we take in and how we take out. So therefore, no one can explain exactly the way you learn it to another person. So much of changes happen. So you are rushing to explain others, but you would have seen only one facet. And you are exaggerating and add all the kind of thing and make a new, the complete picture, and going to explain the other person, and you can see never you can explain what you have seen. That is the problem we are going to solve in the interviews. When you are meditating, what you exactly see, never you can express without adding your ego, without adding your conceit, without adding your desire. So the person who is listening must be very careful how much one can really reflect what one has observed, one has perceived. Never it happens. But mind you, it is not you are a liar. It is not you are a manipulator. This is the way mind is working. So, neurologists, they come to know in our brain, there are two hemispheres, right portion and the left portion, and they are specialized. The left side is very critical and analytical and all the kind of thing. Right side is very aesthetic and considering the everything in one and one in everything kind of thing. But hardly these two lobes are talking each other, it seems. Never. There's a huge connecting tissues, but never they talk each other. Therefore, rational person born, live and die as a rational person. He never recognized there's a huge aesthetic part in his brain, never consulted. The person who is going for aesthetic part or see the beauty of it, he never think that he has capacity to go for this rational and critical kind of thing. So this connection is so rare. The communication is so rare. It says this heart and the mind in the eastern way. In the west, left lobe and the right lobe, there's no communication. That is why the people are in the tension, and that is the one your projection. That is why two people can't work together. We never understand other person, we never communicate with the other person, always clashes. So therefore, the day you understand the similarity, there's no problem to work, all are human. But our mind is always understanding dissimilarities, disparity, so therefore always making grudge. So therefore the Buddha says, Sanya virattasana santi ganta, that means whenever you are to observe what you see is yes, but it is just the first impression. Observe it again and again, so that don't believe the first impression so much. If it is so, there won't be any social disparity, no any fighting, because you are ready to accept. What you have seen, you yourself doubt. It can be changed when you see the second time, third time, fourth time. So, therefore, your perception, you must understand, it is so transient, but we are not bold enough to accept it is transient nature. We try our best to make it permanent. So that is why we become arrogant. That is why we need this conceit. So always when it is working, yes, you have seen, you have touched it, but it may be otherwise if you have to see again and again. The best example is that if you observe, you may see in front of the office, there may be cars and motorbikes are coming. And if the monkey is going to happen to see the side mirror, it see another monkey inside, always fighting. Always fighting. So even some person come and chase, he will break off the side mirror and take it and climb up to the tree. Over there also fighting. Fighting because it sees another dirty monkey inside. It's growing and it's angry. So throughout fighting. That monkey can't understand, it is my own image this is. Human beings are more monkeys than monkeys. They see what I see is believable. What I see is existing. What is existing is I am believing. I am seeing. But the Buddha is challenging. He says, Marichikupama sanya, this you are believing not what you see, you are believing what you consider to be seen, or your perception or your cognition. You don't understand it is cheating you. You don't understand it is not you. It is not yours. So therefore you are fighting and making so much of argument in telling I am talking with my direct experience. So therefore to see, to understand how much it is cheating, exactly the same thing you have to do repetitively. When you are doing repetitively, that is the only way. Not by the seconding of the books or second person. Of course, they are a little bit helpful at the beginning, but repetitive application, then only you can verify, you can develop the confidence, and there you can see how transient is these impressions or cognitions or recognitions or perception. So therefore, whenever there is no such hard and fast or adamantation, you can correlate with the other person. So therefore, whenever the perception of the in-breath and out-breath going to change, going to be transient, without much of tension, without much of expectation, if you let that changes, transition to take place without any distraction, you can see, of course, your image or your recognition may be changed, but the mindfulness be continuous. And in the meditation, under the subject of this upakilesa or the defilements, whenever you see the first impression through the individual characteristic, kind of ego is working. When it is going to be no perception, and whenever going to be subtle perception, then another way the ego is representing. And there you can see some people, not all, some people are more toward the feelings. So they are the people with aesthetics and all the kind of thing. And yet another kind of people, they are more concerned about this perception. And people, those who are more biased or more believing or characterized with the perception, in the meditation, when the primary object becomes subtle, they are often see images. Lot of images. They are talking in terms of images. So people who died or some other characters see an images. Each and every image it matters for such a person. He is asking, what does it mean by that image? What does it mean by this image? So they get engaged with all the transient images happen. They never believe it as one's own mind-made things. So therefore they going to get trapped, get hooked up with all the images happening. And in the Zen tradition, it says, when you are go to the, for example, very subtle breath, and you are in the very calm situation, and at that moment, there are no input of the sensuous impingements. Because your eyes are closed, there are no sound visual objects, and you are cut off from the sounds, no smell, no taste, no bodily contact. You can even feel the touch of your breath. At that moment, for the first time, to the mindfulness, you see your faculties are free of complaints, free of impingements, free of inputs. But the institute is running. So only what you can do is you can project from what is available to the outside. At that moment, your personality, your character traits are projecting through it appears like through the senses, but it is a mind-made game. So therefore you are bound to listen sounds, bound to see images, bound to get some smells, bound to get some taste, bound to get some physical contacts. So when up to that level happen, those who are related with this perception or perception-related characters are making so much of an imaginary world, almost like you are in a dream. And you can't hardly separate and understand whether it is a concept or whether it is a reality. So when it is becoming uncontrollable, you can say you are insane. Situation may go beyond control. So in the meditation, of course, it is happening daily in the little by little basis. So therefore, you have to expect certain amount of meditators in a group always talking in terms of symbols, communication problem. So when that happens, that particular person may not complain about feelings or volitional problems. They are much related with the perception or the distortion of some perception, and some of them may be like very auspicious, some of them may be like very threatening, and whatever may be, it is a mind-made thing. So you have to go through it, you have to how do you call, not aggravating it, calm down them. In a sense, treat them, they are not me, they are not mine, they are not myself. But if you do not know this mantra, what happens is each and every image happens, you get hooked up with. Each and every hooking up, it will be taken you for a ride. And ultimately, after long journey also, you will come back to the neutral feeling. So therefore, at the beginning, of course, you will be carried away little bit, but not like the monkey looking at the mirror. That kind of thing happen in our day-to-day activities. But even the meditation, when the breath become very subtle, the perception going to take the second turn, and there also this kind of thing happen. And there also the Buddha, he says, when such a thing happen, you have to make sure you have undisturbed continuity of the mindfulness, how the gross breath, how the medium breath, how the subtle breath. And when that happen, this imaginary world going to happen, and many things are going to happen. As and when it happens, if you are sharp enough to understand, if you are sharp enough to note them and disclaim them or disavow them, disown them, then only you can cut through and go to the deep layers. In Anapanasati Sutta, that is also one of the Sutta Buddha explained in the Majjhima Nikaya, middle length saying. He says, for first tetrad, how to deal with materiality. I reminded 2 times earlier, at the beginning you see the long in-breath, and then in-breath and out-breath, and then the short in-breath and out-breath. Then you will get a chance to keep the breath with face-to-face. You can see beginning, the middle and the end in the sequential manner. And ultimately you will see, if you are not disturbing them, if you are not reacting unassuming way, they calm down. When is it calming down? If you are skillful without entertaining doubts and falling into sleep or boredom, then you are bound to meet the rapture and the pleasure. Piti patisangvedi, sukha patisangvedi. And then you are going to this completely mental state, no any materiality as a reference point, and you see Chitta Sankhara Patisangvedi Asasissamiti Sikkati. That is the way the Buddha present. Whenever you go to the sphere of feeling, Chitta Sankhara is being analyzed or interpreted as feelings and the perception. For the first time, you have dealt healthy way about the materiality. Now meditation is going to the mental side or non-material sphere, and the feelings and perceptions are going to be very vivid, very prominent. And there are some people are hooked up with feelings, others are with the perception. These are 2 character types. So when that happens, if you are going to assume each and every feeling, if you are going to assume each and every symbol, you get hooked up with. You will be carried away by this kind of thing. Instead, if you know how to disclaim it, if you know, go prepared and disavow it, disown it, then they also going to calm down. This appearance of this, or frothing of this feelings and perception, they going to calm down. Exactly like the breath calming down as a matter, as a form, as a corporeality, and this is also calming down, and there is an art. There is a kind of a methodology. Passambayan chitta sankaram asasisami iti sikkati, passambayan chitta sankaram pasasisami iti sikkati. After long way of trial and error, you will learn the art. Whatever the agitation going to happen in terms of feelings or in terms of this perception, you must not be worried. You must not be carried away. You must disclaim them, and then you can calm down. It precipitates, and then only you go to the lustrous mind, and you see the mind free of defilements, and it is unbelievably like still for a pool, no frills, no thrills. You can see through the water, and you can see the bottom. and you can see your image of your face without a distortion. So before going into that serenity, you've always been threatened by subtle feelings or subtle perception. They are not like sensuous kind of, there's no gross level, they are happening in the mental level. So therefore mindfulness is now, must be sharp enough, mindfulness is now, must be prepared to undergo either this kind of a feeling sphere or the perception sphere, and when it is going there exactly the same thing, what you have to do is disclaim it or disavow it, and expect the equanimous mind, and we go there, you feel kind of a serenity. In Vipassana books, it says, it is quotation from the Dhammapada, it says, Sunyagaram pavittassa santachittassa bhikkhuno amanusi rati honti pasanto udayabbayang. So you see only the rising and passing away. You never going to try see whether it's a materiality or feeling or perception. It's a nature of rising and passing away, without heeding, without discriminate. And disclaimer, it says Sunyagaram pavittassa santachittassa bhikkhuno. The monk who is skillful, gone into the solitude place, amanusi rati hoti, he come and abide in a kind of a pleasure, it is beyond all human pleasures. You are in such a celestial mental state, that time you are not away from the sensuous impingements, even the mental proliferations, even the mind-made worlds. You know that is also a friction. That's also humiliating you. So you disclaim it, and then only you can go to the real serenity. And that is the only moment, or that is the one known as passaddhi. That is what we call healing power of the mind and the body. So more you be there, it's the natural healing process is going to take place, and all the imbalances in the physical body, all the imbalances in the mental body are going to come into equalization. So that is highly emphasized in Bojjhanga Sutta, and that is the mind, it is reaching to the factors of enlightenment. There the Buddha, whenever some other monks are becoming sick, he go and chant Bojjhanga Sutta, and in between it says, Passaddhi sambojjhango ko kassapa maya sammadakkhata bhavita bahulikata. O Kassapa, I have taught you well this serenity. Develop it. Believe it. And I have shown you, when you bring the mind up to that level, that will be the most healing. And when the Buddha fallen sick, he also asked Maha, Chunda, please recite the Bojjhanga Sutta, and he himself remind and bring the mind to this situation, and no perception, no ripples of perception, no ripples of feelings, no any address of the materiality, he can develop his own the healing power. So if you wish to have any well-being towards you, if you have any compassion towards you, if you have any loving kindness to you, that is the only point you can see, you can give the maximum nourishment for the healing. Beyond that, or up to that point, all the kind of irritation and friction from the materiality, all the kind of frictions and irritation from the feelings and perception happens. But all the three, you can see through, you can penetrate through by non-reaction, by unassuming, by disclaiming, this is me, this is not me, this is not mine, this is not myself. So this one, the application of this not me, not mine, not self, you must really employ as and when it is happening. So This one, of course, applicable to the materiality as well as the feelings, but it is more appealing to the perception, because otherwise the perceptions are so deranging, or pulling you from the equilibrium. Ultimately, you do not know whether that perception is benevolent or malevolent. So best thing is to keep the situation neutral. Keep the situation is equilibrium. So therefore, clearing the ground, making the ground clear by disclaimer, starting from the materiality and then the feeling and then the perception, then only you can verify, you can for sure say that whether the mind is ready to undergo drastic changes. So therefore it's a kind of three hurdles, and it is happening in the sequential way. Even if you manage today, and if you can go to that deep serene or serenity, when you are coming tomorrow to the sitting again, you have to start from the beginning. You never can claim yesterday it happened, why not come today? You have no such a forward contract with this kind of thing. So when today you are coming to that serenity, you have to do again a series of trial and error. But the advantage, the good thing of it is, now you are using your own techniques. You are using and take with the responsibility. If the technique is correct, you develop confidence. If it is not so, you have to go back and again redo it. So therefore, slowly you become independent of the master, independent of your book, independent of your other external thing. You develop your own. And that is how the confidence comes. And when and where you try to understand that how the perception is cheating and how the perception is pulling you from observing the same thing. The tactic the Buddha given is, if you observe the same thing, it is the way to Nibbana. If you are changing the object, it's the way to Sansara. So varietal entertainment is definitely for the Sansara. That is what we do. That is what we change from seeing, hearing, smelling, touching, tasting, no agenda. So the Buddha says, at least understand there is no agenda. That itself is a kind of a preparation of your mindset. And if the mind is ready to go forward, take one thing and apply the mind again and again. Of course, if you do it with hatred, if the hatred is the energy, it appears like boredom. It appears like monotony. But the day you understand the truth of suffering, when it is manifesting, it appears like the kind of humiliation. It appears like something boring, something monotonous, but mind is pure. It is not creating new volitional activities. So therefore, moment you shift from the hatred base to the wisdom base, you see this our hobbies, our fashions, and all thing is to pull ourselves from this medium situation to taken for parietal entertainment. And if you are going to justify it, the whole world will be with you, because the whole world that is what they do. But the Buddha will be far away. Wherever you do applying the same thing again and again, even though it is boring, and the day you understand through boredom, through your wisdom, you understand it's a very secure place. It is a pure form, primordial form, unpolluted form, and that is giving you your own methods, how to go and abide in this serenity, and that is what the maximum compassion you can do it to yourself. So therefore, when Prince Rahula come and ask the treasure from the Buddha, the Yasodhara, the mother, expected he would have hidden treasure, big gold and jewels and kind of thing, and he expect the son will come back with the due treasure. But instead he told, pull him to the monastery, shave his head and gave instructions for meditation, and he asks daily to sweep the lawn and take the handful of sand and throw away, have an inspiration, may I get so much of instructions or advices equaling to this number of grains of sand. So you have to be very humble and practice. Ultimately, when he comes to the enlightenment, that is the dowry or that is the treasure you can give. Are we teaching our children for that treasure? What are we teaching them? We teach them varietal entertainment. We teach them one-upmanship. We teach them envious situation. We teach them this changing of the objects. So therefore the Buddha says, as far as you are changing the postures, that is you are away from the truth of suffering. More and more you to understand this perception, even if it is boring, even if it is sleepy, even if it is monotonous, you try to keep the track, you try to keep the mindfulness, and then only it is cutting through and going to show the real nature or intrinsic nature of suffering, and all the other religions will prove you and promise you all the other kind of sensuous pleasure. But the Buddha, of course, at the early part, by doing merits and generosity and kind of thing, you will accumulate merits and get the sensuous pleasure. But that is not the end. When you cutting through this perception, go to the area where no perception to your rational mind, but still you feel your mindfulness, you feel you are living, you are being, without any sign, without any notion, without any perception, that is more secured place. So therefore, Buddha says, from the sign to the signless situation, for the perception to the non-perceptional situation, from the rational mind to the irrational mind, it is the journey of the vipassana. So if you wish to measure whether you are progressing or not, these are the clear criterion that you are the first one to come to know. Even the sign of in-breath and out-breath is there. You have the mindfulness. When the sign is disappearing, if the mindfulness is intact, that mindfulness is very powerful mindfulness. And the gross to the subtlety, and if you can rational mind to the irrational mind still, if you can maintain the mindfulness, that mindfulness is ready to go to the subconscious and the hidden area, and that is the where you have the middle part. So therefore, when you are coming into the sanya or the perception, you can understand how much you are communicating with your spiritual being, spiritual development or spiritual progress, and many expect it is from the outside. The Buddha has to come and tell whether you are progressing, or the teacher has to come and tell. Yes, they are, but second hand, you yourself will understand whenever you are preparing to know the perception. But before ending the talk, I would say, very difficult to start meditation with the perception. You have to always start with the materiality, kayanupassana. And then you have to be somewhat acquainted with the feelings, and then only you become prepared for the perception. So therefore, always it is a gradual process. So more and more you live in a retreat like that, where daily you are practicing the same timetable, and you come up to the momentum, then few days time, you can cut through into deep layers, and they are when and where you become dumbbound, when and where you find difficult to explain, and that is the place you be with yourself. That is, if you are trusting upon such a situation, if you are unshaken under such a situation, then your internal confidence is developing. So even though this part is subtle, difficult to explain, I thought the sharing with this kind of idea will help someone to develop one's own confidence, and with that only you will be independent from all the external source. So may this talk also helpful for you to develop the confidence and maintain the consistency of the meditation, and may help to go into the deep layers of the perception. Thank you very much for listening.